As an American Orchid Society judge, there are two ways of judging orchids for us. In one sense, there are awards that the society gives to plants that remain with a plant forever. In this case, the plant is presented at a judging. It could be presented at a show like this. We look at the plant and we have in mind a hypothetical ideal for what that plant should look like. And we compare what we're looking at with that hypothetical ideal. The ideal is shaped by all the plants that we've seen, that other people have seen. When we come into a show, we still approach the plants with that ideal, but now we're looking at a different universe. We're looking at what's in front of us in the show. And so we're comparing one plant to another plant. It's possible that nothing in the show would be worthy of an American Orchid Society award, yet many, many plants are worthy of recognition in terms of what's available in the show. Now, when we look at a plant, and I will show you the plant, we tend to look primarily at the flower. And there are really three things that we look at. The first thing is the shape of the flower. The second thing is the color of the flower. Those two count for anywhere from 75 to 85 or more % of the flower. And the next thing we look at is what I might call presentation. The size of the flower, how it's arranged. Are they arranged in an attractive way so that you can see them all? Are they clustered together? This would not rate very high for arrangement. And that's basically the way we go. Orchid judges do not pay as much attention to the quality of the plant. For instance, if you look here, you see little black marks on the sheath. One of the reasons for this is that orchids grow so slowly. One of these growths might be produced in a year. And if this is all the tissue that the plant makes to live on in a year, if you were doing some rapidly growing plant and you saw that you had a cut or a slit like this, you'd say, okay, I'll get rid of it, it's unsightly. But it would be like getting rid of an arm or a leg on a person because of a wart. You don't do that on orchids. And so basically that's it. And it's like wine or food or something else. You can make a lot of the complexities and the arcane nature of things, rarity and stuff like that. But basically, a good orchid looks nicer. It's prettier than a bad orchid. Just like a good wine tastes better than a wine that's a poor wine. And that's basically all there is to it.
I got it. Yep.
Okay.
I'm
well,
right there.
Are you going to record too or not?
Yep, I'm recording now.
Oh, very good. Okay. Well, anyway, this particular flower has nothing unique about orchids other than the fact that all orchids have the same basic pattern. The pattern is, as we've discussed before, there are three flower parts that make up the bud and contain the other three flower parts. These three here are called sepals, and they make up the bud like this, and they open up to expose 1, 2, 3 that are called petals, 2, and then the lip. And the lip should be thought of as a landing platform or an airfield for an insect. The insect likes this, looks at this flower and decides he wants to fly in there and fertilize the column. So his idea is to land here, crawl in under the column, and as he crawls underneath, the pollen, which you can see as a little yellow deposit right there, has a sticky pad on it. And as you go in, you brush the sticky pad, but it's protected by a little cap. When you back out, you flip the cap off and the pollen sticks to your back. Then you fly to another flower. And now you've got the pollen on your back. You're an insect. Here's a flower, 6 flower parts, a landing field. Land here, go in there, and as you go in, the pollen on your back sticks to the undersurface, or female part of the flower, which is behind. You can't see it well up in there, but it's right up in there, right where my finger is pointing. And it sticks in there, and that causes fertilization, and then the fertilization pollen tubes run down, and the seed pod begins right down here where my fingers are now. Behind the flower, that 2 inches behind the flower, that is where the seed pod is going to form, and it's going to form up to 1 million seeds. And as you bear in mind, orchid seeds are so small they're like dust. And in order for them to germinate, they have to find a place where they can land and be fertilized with the help of a fungus. And the best place to do that would be a tree or a place where there is moisture and yet air circulation and bark and the fungus that it becomes symbiotic with or it grows with. And this combination is why these seeds are so many of them. You have 1 million seeds, you can't grow 1 million plants from that, or you don't wish to. If you're 10 or 20 of them, of those seeds, germinate anywhere, then the future of this type of orchid is guaranteed. And every orchid here, in one way or another, has that same pattern of flowering. We could go and look at some other flowers to see the same pattern in some very... This group of orchids is a complete different pattern of growth, which is very unique and very interesting. They're called the lady slippers. And as you can see, the pattern of growth is completely different than what we described before. I very carefully told you that there are 6 parts to the flower. This one only has 5. And what happens is this and the one underneath that you can see with some difficulty underneath they make up the bud. And these, they're called sepals. These petals on each side then unfold with this lip, which is in the form of a pouch. The insect lands in the pouch, and he cannot crawl back up the inside of the pouch because there are down-pointing hairs. In order to fertilize the flower, he has to climb up through the structure in the back called the staminode. And you can come over to this one over here slowly, and I'll show you how big the staminode can get, that yellow thing in the center. In order for the insect to get out, he has to crawl behind it and come out right or left behind it, picking up the pollen, and then go off to another flower, perhaps, and deposit his pollen by climbing backwards out. And this group, the lady slippers, are completely incompatible from hybridization from the other type that we just described. But they are of themselves very beautiful, and as you can see, these are hybrids of considerable beauty created by specialists over the last roughly 120 years. And these are the product, you're seeing the product of a top-notch grower on the East Coast. Probably one of the best Paphiopedilum or lady slipper growers on the East Coast.
It's like our lady slippers. So that's what kind of makes them easier to grow in that respect, is because they are growing in a lower light situation, which most of our homes are lower light situations. So, and then humidity is also a big issue that a lot of people deal with orchids, and these are not humidity needy plants, so that also makes it an easier plant to grow. Again, so I say, you know, for me, I've been doing it for so long, I don't even think about it. And
how do you, I'm going to use the wrong term, but how do you sort of cultivate a plant from start? Is it a seed type thing? Is it a cutting? How do you do it?
These are only grown by seed. It's the only group of orchids that cannot be cloned. So the rest of the orchids we can clone, but these have to be done by seed, so it makes each one of them an individual, because these 3 plants are all from the same seed pod. Mm-hmm. And you can see that they're similar, but they are different. So they're going to be like children. There's going to be little differences on them. And then sometimes so like these is the same species, but you can see that there is quite a difference between the 2 of them.
How big is a lady slipper seed, and how do you get one?
It's like dust. It is dust, and it can't be grown at home. So it has to be done in sterile conditions, has to be sent to a laboratory to be done. And plants like this and many of these plants usually will take anywhere from 5 to 15 years before we see our first flower. So they do take a long time, and that's why sometimes